My clock says it is shortly after 4 o'clock, so we are going to go ahead and get started with this Q&A with MSBA session for the upcoming superintendent search in Hastings Public Schools. Thank you very much for being here with us today. We really appreciate your presence. My name is Barb Dorn. I'm the Director of Leadership Development and Executive Search at MSBA. And today we're going to be discussing most of my work in superintendent search. I also help with superintendent evaluation, and yet today the focus is going to be on the search in Hastings. Also with me are two other MSBA staffers. We have Jamison Silman here. JJ is our technology guru. So if you have any issues with technology throughout the course of this session, please reach out to JJ. He will place his contact information in the chat box, and he'll make sure that you are able to continue to be connected and participate in this session. Also with me is Amy Jordan. Amy Jordan is a member of MSBA's search team, and she will be monitoring the chat box for today's session. So thank you to both of you for being here with us today. I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we're going to be covering, but first I want to also share with you some housekeeping items. I'm sure you noticed when you logged on that this session is being recorded. And the reason that we are recording this is we recognize that not everyone can be here at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday. So we want to be sure to answer all of your questions that may crop up about the superintendent search, as well as share an overview of some things relative to this search. And then it will be placed on the district website. So anyone who would like to see this and get accurate and transparent information about the superintendent search, the link to watch this at a later date will be available on the district website throughout the entirety of the search. So that is why you are being recorded. Also, I'm sure you noticed you are muted. We would like any and all questions you may have about the search process to be typed into that chat box. Amy will be watching the chat box carefully, and she can interrupt me with any questions that are relevant to what I might be presenting at that moment. She will be sharing all of those questions anonymously. So ask anything that you may want to know about the search process. She will not be sharing any names, not only who's asking them, but she also cannot share any questions that address community member, school board member, candidate, staff, etc. by name. So please don't do that. And she also cannot share any questions that may be inappropriate. So thank you in advance for your assistance with that. Sometimes she also may need to paraphrase questions. We often get questions that are very similar, and so Amy may occasionally paraphrase to get across the thought that what it is that you are looking to be informed about, and make sure that we will get to all of that before the end of the session. We will be done typically in about a half hour. These last anywhere from 30 to 35 minutes, but if you have questions, we will stay as long as necessary up until 5 o'clock. We do want to be very careful with your time, but we will stay on as long as needed to ensure you're comfortable with what is going to happen during the search, why is it happening, and when is it going to happen. That's the information we'll be sharing with you today. There's two parts to what we're going to cover. The first is an informational overview of superintendent search. I'll share a very brief review of the big picture of superintendent search, sort of a 30,000-foot view, and then I will also speak specifically to the search in Hastings. We'll share the timeline, the vacancy brochure, the stakeholder survey. All of that information is something that we want to get in the hands of the stakeholders. So that's the first part. The second part is answering your questions. Thank you to anyone who submitted questions in advance. I'll be answering those as well as other questions that we are typically asked during a Q&A session. So I guess that's about it before we're going to dive right in. I do want to thank you on behalf of the Hastings Public Schools School Board. They are very excited to have people get access to the accurate information about the search. And so I hope that you will rewatch this at a later time if you need to be reminded of sort of what's happening and why. And also please tell other people to go watch it on the website as well. So thank you very much for being here. In terms of superintendent search in general, we say that a superintendent search is both an art and a science. And the art side of things in a superintendent search involve things such as deciding on a leadership profile. What are the background skills and experiences that the school board is looking for in its next leader? Also creating the vacancy brochure and marketing the opportunity to get the word out as widely as possible to people who may be interested in the opportunity to serve as your district's next leader. Also working with stakeholders is also on the art side. So there are a lot of things that are more nuances and not as clearly defined because they are very specific to Hastings. Now the science side of things does come into play in terms of two Minnesota state statutes, the open meeting law and the Government Data Practices Act. Both of those apply to all superintendent searches in the state of Minnesota. For instance, the open meeting law does apply to every step of the superintendent search. There will be no closed sessions by the school board in terms of the superintendent search. So all of the work around this search process will be done in a public meeting and posted accordingly. So anyone can come and watch the Hastings School Board conduct the superintendent search. It will be done in the open. That being said, it does need to be balanced with the Government Data Practices Act here in Minnesota, which is the data privacy laws. So in our state, every candidate's name when they apply for this position is private data. That cannot be shared until and only if they're selected to be interviewed by the school board. So for example, your school board will see all of the applications of the candidates that are interested in this position. They cannot share the names of any of those people or any identifying information because that's private data. And that includes discussing the applications in an open meeting. And we'll help guide them through so they're not violating any data privacy laws. Now, state statute says that a finalist is determined to be someone who has been selected to be interviewed by the school board. Statute does not differentiate between semifinalists and finalists. We will call them semifinalists in round one and finalists in round two, but as soon as they are identified to be interviewed by the board, candidate A, B, C, for example, after that, their names go public. Now, much of their information does remain private, but their names will go public, so the public will know who it is the board's going to be interviewing for this position. So I think that's sort of the push and pull of the state statutes, balanced data privacy, and open meeting law. And that will apply again to every single step of the search. Are there any questions, Amy, before I get into the timeline specifically for Hastings?
Not at this time.
All right, thank you. JJ, if you could please screen share the timeline for the Hastings search. I do want to go over that next. So in terms of timeline, this has been adopted by the school board. It is posted on your district website. District staff is doing a very good job of keeping the information in the forefront. So anyone who wants to know anything about the search, please go to the website. The first thing I'll point out on this timeline, the second line down, March 29th to April 10th, that is the stakeholder survey. That information is currently being gathered right now from all stakeholder groups. It's available online in both English and Spanish. There are also hard copies available throughout the district, and that information is shared on the website as well. Please note the survey is open until April 10th at midnight. So next Monday at midnight is the deadline for any and all stakeholders to provide input on the search process. April 4th is today, the Q&A session that we are facilitating and again recording. And then between March 29th and April 24th is when this position is posted for applications to come in. So it has already been posted on the 29th. It will be posted through midnight on the 24th. And on here are listed the posting sites that we are sharing it on. MSBA's website, MASA, which is the Superintendent's Statewide Association, EdPost out of St. Cloud State University, and Revelis. Now, Revelis is a proprietary nationwide database used by school board associations who conduct executive search. So by virtue of being on Revelis, this position is available nationwide. If someone in Michigan or Wisconsin or Florida or Texas is looking for a superintendent opportunity, they will see the Minnesota openings. And so all of those places as listed there are where candidates typically go to find a position for which to apply. And that again was posted on the 29th and closes at midnight on the 24th. Also on the 24th is the date that MSBA will be meeting with your school board for interview training. We need to make sure that your board adheres to all applicable laws around superintendent search during the interview process. Your district is an EEOC employer. We are an EEOC search agency, and so we need to ensure that every step of this process is done according to those laws. It also mentions on April 24th that we'll be reviewing the stakeholder report with the school board. So at that meeting, we will share with the board members an overview of the stakeholder survey results. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the session here today. The deadline again is April 24th. We begin working on them on April 25th to ensure that they are complete. And on April 26th, your board members will have access to these applications in a secure location in the cloud. Again, they cannot divulge the names of anyone who's applied for this position, but we do feel it's important as the hiring authority for your district that your school board members have access to see who's applied. We will be doing some due diligence to recommend candidates as finalists to the board, but ultimately the board will be the ones making that decision. And so that's why we feel it's important they can see who has applied in case they're interested in candidates that have not been recommended by MSBA. Then you'll see on May 10th is a big night for Hastings Public Schools. 7 p.m. there's a special meeting on May 10th where the board will decide on the finalists. At this meeting, we will be discussing them only as candidate A, candidate B, candidate C, as I mentioned earlier, not providing any identifying information. We can't discuss in a public session where they currently work, how long they may have held a particular position, gender pronouns, anything to reveal who those people are is against the law. So we'll be ensuring that that night we are only speaking of A, B, C. At the conclusion of that meeting, the names of the finalists will be read aloud for the first time. And then let the Googling begin because the names go public that night. All other names of applicants will remain private forever. And your school board will be trained in that, so they cannot confirm or deny. Even if someone is telling folks, gosh, I applied and I didn't get an interview, your board members cannot confirm or deny that that person was in the pool. That's private data. They have set May 16th as the day for the first round of interviews. Typically, we see 3 to 6 people as semifinalists in the first round of interviews, and that would be on May 16th, but we won't know that until the board selects those finalists on May 10th. Now, one of the things that I want to mention is a decision that your board will be making relative to live streaming the interviews. Very often people expect that so that you can sit in the comfort of your office or your home and watch the interviews because it is public. I just want to caution your board that MSBA will be recommending that you not live stream the interviews in your district. The reason for that is because candidates who are being interviewed later in the day can watch the first interviews if they choose to, and they would have a significant advantage by knowing what the questions are before they come into their interview. So we want to ensure as level a playing field as possible for Hastings Public Schools. I am sure that all of you can agree you want the very best candidate for your district, not the best prepared candidate. So that decision is yet to be made, but we will recommend not live streaming for that purpose. However, anyone who wants to watch these interviews can come to the district and watch them because again, we're doing this all in the public. And then as things go to according to plan, on the 24th, they would begin negotiations. The plan would be to approve an employment contract with your new superintendent on May 31st, and they would take their position over on July 1 in your district as the new superintendent. So I'll pause there and ask Amy, are there any questions at all right now or anything on the timeline that I should address?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. JJ, if you could next screen share the brochure, please. This vacancy brochure is available on the website, and it is something that is attached to all of the postings that we have out there for this position in all of those different websites. So what this is a 2-page vacancy brochure, which will pique people's interest in your district's opportunity. So first of all, on the front page of the brochure, on the left side, you will see the points of pride for Hastings Public Schools. And you have so many things to be proud of in your district. And so these are things that people may already know if they're familiar with Hastings, or they may not. And so there are a lot of wonderful things that they're going to learn about when they take a look at this brochure. On the right side of the front page, it's the same sort of information about your community. And again, you have some really exciting things about the location for this position. And so we want candidates to know what's so great about the community that they may want to work there. By the numbers at the bottom on the front, obviously are some statistics relative to the district, and on the right is that timeline. It's very important that all candidates are very clear on what the timeline entails for your search. Now on the top of the second page, this is that leadership profile that I referred to earlier. This is what the school board has identified as being the priorities for them in seeking a leader for your district. They're looking for someone who puts the needs of your students first. And then they list another 7 things that are important to them in the next leader. Now, there are many, many things that a superintendent is responsible for, and they are expected to have experience and skill sets in a lot of different areas. What we needed the board to do, however, and they did a very good job of it, is prioritize what's most important for them. They will use these hiring criteria in several different ways. They will use it in selecting the candidates to be interviewed. We will as well. MSBA holds up the hiring criteria next to all of those applications to find the best fit for Hastings. So the selection of the finalists is one way. Crafting the interview questions for both round 1 and round 2 will be molded around these hiring criteria. And it is something that they'll use in their deliberations when deciding who to bring back for a second round of interviews and ultimately who to hire as the next superintendent. In addition to this, and this is something I want to make a really important point about, on top of the leadership profile already established by the board, we'll be using the stakeholder survey results to help us in all 3 of those regards. So it's very important that all stakeholders in Hastings fill out that survey. That will help us compare and contrast the stakeholders' thoughts with the school board. And almost always they're in alignment. Sometimes, however, the stakeholders are looking for something in addition to what the board has identified. So we really need to know those things in order to help identify the finalists, craft those interview questions, and make that final selection. So again, please remember to fill out that survey before next Monday. And finally, at the bottom of this page of the brochure, you can see my name. My phone number is on here and my email address. I am happy to answer any and all questions about the search process from stakeholders in Hastings, as well as for interested candidates. So please feel free to reach out to me at MSBA if I can be of any assistance. I will pause for another moment and check with Amy. Is there anything in the chat box yet?
No, we are good to continue on.
Thank you very much. All right, JJ, now we're going to share the stakeholder survey so folks can see what that looks like. Now, a couple of key points on the stakeholder survey is that it is available online. It is in English and Spanish. There's the toggle switch there. So it is online, and we want to get as many people filling this out 24/7 as we can by midnight next week. It is also, however, as I mentioned, available in hard copy because not everyone can or wants to fill out a survey online. So if you are interested in filling this out in hard copy, please go to any of the locations that are identified on the district website, get a hard copy, return it to that same place when you have completed it, and you will have your results included with all of the online results as well. So I'll walk through this kind of quickly. It's a bit of a long survey, but it only takes maybe 5 to 10 minutes, perhaps, filling it out. Some people take less, some people take more. The first thing we ask for is a self-identifier. What hat are you wearing when you fill out this survey? And we know that many of you wear several hats. You may be a parent and a staff member, and we completely understand that. So please select which category you are viewing these questions through when you fill it out. All right. And the first questions are all quantitative. We're asking you to select your top 6. All right, top 6 areas of expertise, for example, and there are quite a few listed here. I want to acknowledge that all of these are important. All of these are a part of a superintendent's role. However, we need your help as stakeholders to prioritize them. So please help us by selecting 6. The next one asks for the top 6 most important traits or skills. When you look at this list, it looks long. And I think it's because it's all very scrunched up on the one side with those letters, but this is really important. The top 6 of these will either mirror or not mirror the results your school board gave us because they used this same selection process to come up with criteria, and then we wordsmith them to really fit Hastings. So this is an apples to apples opportunity for us to compare stakeholders to the board's decision. So this question is very important. The next question in the survey is pretty clear. It's important that the next superintendent have previous experience as a superintendent, yes or no. Very simple. And then finally, the top 6 personal characteristics you're looking for in terms of someone's personality, character, those sorts of things. And again, they're all important, but we want some of these to rise to the top to help us find the right person for your district. And then we move into these qualitative questions. In other words, they're open-ended. So we're asking for your thoughts on what's some of the good things currently taking place. What are some of the challenges for your district over the next 5 years? What does the new person need to know about the history of the school district and the community in order to be successful? And then any other questions you might have. There are no character limits on these open-ended questions. Please share with us what you really think, as much as you need to. Also, these surveys are anonymous, so we do not know who is saying what. And I think that helps increase how candid people are with their results. So please do be candid. And the other thing I want to mention about the survey is you do not need to fill out the entire survey in order for us to get your feedback. If you only want to fill out the open-ended questions and not the number crunching quantitative stuff, feel free to do that, or vice versa. Or if you only want to fill out 1 or 2 questions on here, your survey results do still count. All right, so you're not required to fill out the entire survey if you're not interested or you don't have the time to do so. You can still be counted in the results that we will summarize and present to the school board. That's all I want to say about the vacancy brochure and the timeline and the survey at the moment. So I will pause and ask Amy if there is anything else right now in the chat box.
There is not right now.
Okay, I am going to give you a couple of numbers about this survey because I think people always want to know where are we in terms of numbers. So I will share with you that based on your student enrollment number, whatever that number is, we usually say about 12% of that number is what we can expect to see on average in a district survey. Sometimes we have more participation, sometimes we have less. So in your district, for instance, based on 3,987 students, that's the size of your student body, we would expect to receive about 478 responses. That would be an average response rate to a survey in a district of that size for superintendent searches. So I checked shortly before I got on this session, and you currently are standing at 303 respondents to this survey. So that's very good. And we would expect over the course of the next 6 days that that number will climb higher. And it's possible that you will get past that 478 number and be above average. So if you are interested again or know people who've not filled this out yet, please ask them to do so before midnight on Monday, April 10th. All right, that's it with the information that we're going to share about superintendent search in general and about the Hastings Public Schools search. Now I'm going to move on to the questions that were submitted in advance, as well as any questions that we typically see asked in a session such as this. So again, thank you if you were able to do so. And I will answer these here right now. The first thing I'll say is we did receive a number of questions in that form that are questions for the candidates. Questions that the school board might ask of candidates. So those are not about the process, and so I'm not able to answer them today, but I will say if you submitted questions that were for candidates, I will make sure that those suggested questions are considered by your school board when we work with them on developing the interview questions for Hastings Public Schools. So they will see those, and thank you for submitting them. We did receive some questions that are in the same vein. For example, one question was, in addition to a background check, will superintendent candidates be questioned about their affiliations with political organizations? There is another question very similar. Will prospective candidates be required to make known their political affiliation? So the short answer to that is no. That will not be a consideration, nor will it be asked of the candidates during the interview process. And I'll give you the reason for that. The reason for having a nonpartisan superintendent search process is really not to remove all politics from the governing process, because I think everyone who is on a school board has a particular lens through which they view all of the decisions being made by the board. And that's a very good thing. Diversity of thought strengthens board decisions because everyone has their own perspective on these things, which does include political persuasions as well. But the reason for having a nonpartisan superintendent search process is not to remove that, but it's really to remove a conflict point that can keep boards from doing their job and from doing their job well. It has, especially over the last few years, created conflict points which have stopped school boards from governing effectively, and that has been very frustrating for superintendents, for school boards, for community members. It's not something that should affect what is best for the students of your district. And so when we work with school boards, we talk about do what is best for the students in your district. And that is the lens I know school board members will use in making those decisions. Those students truly are the heartbeat of your district. So every decision that's made is made in the best interest of the students. And bringing any political persuasions into it or any arguments about politics detracts from what's best for the students in Hastings Public Schools. So it is not something that will be asked or considered in selecting the next leader for Hastings Public Schools. So thank you for asking those questions. Another question we were asked, are we prioritizing a woman or BIPOC candidate? Thank you for asking. I would say one of the things that makes MSBA's searches different from other search firms is that we do provide all of the application materials to your school board members. They see all of the applications. That is different from most search firms, which only present information to board members from search firms that are recommending. Here are the 5 that we're recommending, and here is some information about them. The rest of the pool, the board doesn't see. But candidates know that in MSBA's searches, school board members will see all of their application materials. So we do see a higher percentage of women and people of color applying for our searches because we are not working for candidates or trying to place a particular slate. We are working for the school board. And we think in order for them to make a more informed decision, they will be seeing all of that information. So our searches statistically tend to have a greater number of applicants that are women or BIPOC. You never know, though, until the pool closes, who is interested in this position. People will apply for their own reasons. And I think some of the things that affect a candidate's decision to serve Hastings Public Schools will be based on the location and the reputation of the district, particularly board and superintendent relationships, and also salary. Those are 3 things which do drive individuals' decisions as to whether or not to apply. So we will know after the deadline for applications passes, and I would expect ultimately the school board's decision on who to interview and who to hire will be based on that leadership profile. And someone who fits those criteria identified by the board and also supported by the stakeholder feedback, they will select the best candidate for the district based on those things. But thank you for asking. That is a really great question. And then finally, we had a question, are we prioritizing someone who lives in or who is invested in the Hastings community? I'm going to split that into 2 questions. So is the board prioritizing someone who lives in the Hastings community? No, they cannot, because that is illegal. Residency is not a requirement for superintendents in the state of Minnesota. It's not like a first responder that can be required to live within a certain distance of the city center. Superintendents can do the job from anywhere as long as they are able to meet the expectations of their job description and what the school board has tasked them with doing. And so residency cannot be considered in the interview process. If they offer information on moving to the community, the board cannot consider it in making their decision, because again, they are an EEOC employer. So residency, no. As far as someone who is going to be invested in the community, I would say yes, because if someone's invested in your community, that means they are involved. And if you look back at that brochure, and I'll just do this real quick for you, in looking at the brochure, the #1 criteria that the board established was finding someone who, in addition to putting students first, someone who is visible and accessible to the school board staff, students, parents, and community. So someone who is visible and accessible says to me that the board is looking for someone who is invested in the community. So I would say yes on that. Thank you for asking. There was also a statement submitted. It's not a question, however, and so I am not going to be able to answer that because it was not a question. So that is it for the questions submitted in advance. I'm going to move on to answering a couple of questions that we typically get asked, but I'll pause for just a moment and see if Amy has anything in the chat box.
There is a question in the chat box. So, and this is a really great question too. So I'm just going to read it to you. Give me just 1 second here.
Okay.
Okay. It says last year's strategic planning vision continuous improvement listed Increase staff perception that their voice and input matter, 49%. And increase staff perception of being supported to do well, 59%. So the question is, how will ISD 200 staff be involved in the process? And then will the ability to increase these perceptions be considered as an important priority when choosing a new superintendent?
Great question. Thank you so much. I would say, first and foremost, please, all staff, fill out that survey. Thus far, when we're looking at the respondent categories, there is a smaller percentage of responses from staff than we typically see in a search. And I know how busy everyone is and how full your plates are. So if possible, more staff participation in that survey would be very useful in shaping the hiring criteria and things such as that. So first of all, please do that. The second thing I would say, as far as additional input, when the board considers that stakeholder survey on whatever date that was it the 10th? Let me look. May 10th. Nope. April 24th. On April 24th, the board will be considering the stakeholder report that we're going to provide to them. So I would hope we have a high number of staff that have provided input on that. When they have seen that report, they're going to be considering additional stakeholder input. And there are usually 3 options they're going to consider. The first would be during the interview process. Sometimes a district will have interview committees established in addition to the school board. So there might be a staff group that interviews the candidates. There might be a community group, student group, whatever that might be. They are interview committees. They are not hiring committees. We need to be very clear on that the school board is the only hiring authority. So that's one option for them to consider. Another option would be for them to consider some stakeholder input on the school board interviews. When they conduct their interviews, there may be identified stakeholders who will watch, observe, and provide input on the candidate's strengths and areas of growth that may be needed in terms of what the school board interviews revealed. And then the third option would be relying on the voice of the stakeholders in the survey report as the voice of the stakeholders throughout the remainder of the process, including the interviews and the deliberations process. We'll spell out the pros and cons for each of those to the board on that night, because there are pros and cons to each of those. So I can't give you an exact answer because I don't know yet. I do know that last year, the vast majority of boards, we did 33 searches. And I think about 23 of those school boards selected the stakeholder survey as the instrument to use throughout the remainder of the search. We had one district that did decide to have interview committees, and then we had another 5 or 6 that had the input during the school board interviews. And so that was the trend last year, and that's something that I think the board needs to consider in Hastings. So I don't have an answer for you yet, but I really do appreciate you pointing to the strategic plan and the input that was identified relative to staff, because that strategic plan is your beacon. That is where the district is headed. That is what they will use to help winnow down the candidate pool to those who they feel could implement that vision most effectively. And it will be something that they'll hold up as they go out throughout the process and refer back to. So thank you for mentioning that strategic plan. That's very helpful. There was a lot in that question. I hope I answered it for you, but if I didn't, please feel free to call me after the session or anytime between now and the conclusion of the search. Thank you very much. Thank you, Amy. Another question that sometimes get asked is, are internal candidates given a preference over external candidates? That answer is no. All candidates are treated the same, whether they are internal or external. They all must go through the exact same process, going back to EEOC requirements, in order to be considered for and perhaps offered the position of the superintendency. Now, sometimes internal candidates have told people they've applied because they're very excited. Now, again, your board can't comment on that because their name is private. The only time that name will go public is if they're selected for an interview. Not all internal candidates are selected to be interviewed as a finalist, in which case the board cannot say anything about why they weren't selected, because as far as the external community is concerned, the board can't confirm or deny that their name was in there. But internal and external candidates are treated exactly the same. How big will the applicant pool be? Boy, that's a big one. I wish I had a crystal ball. I don't know. And it is something that unfortunately this year and last year, the numbers are lower. than in past years, whereas we might have seen 20 to 25 or 30 applicants in previous years. We're now seeing anywhere from 10 to maybe 15. And that number being smaller seems disappointing, particularly to board members who've been on the board for a long time and may have had very large pools in the past. I want to point out, though, that the size of the applicant pool is not a reflection on the quality of the candidates. In fact, if the quantity has gone down, which it has, I feel like we've seen the quality go up, because in the past, I do think there were people who had a superintendent's license, wanted to throw their hat in the ring, see if they could get an interview. And it wasn't necessarily something that they were sure they wanted. It was just something that they thought they would try because they had a license. That's not happening anymore. The people who are in the pool, of course, not only have a license, they also know exactly what the job entails. It has not been easy these last few years to serve as a superintendent or a board member or a staff or a student or a parent or a community member. It has taken a toll on everyone. So the people who are in these pools this year and last year for positions of superintendency really want the job. And I think that's increased the quality of the folks that we are reviewing. But as far as how big will the pool be, we have absolutely no idea until midnight of the deadline. But that is something that's very often asked. The rest of the ones that are asked most often, we've already covered either by people asking in advance. How will we know what's happening with the search? Please go to the district website. Again, they're doing a great job of keeping that information current. All of the meetings are on there, the dates, all of that is already being provided. Please attend school board meetings and watch the board in action throughout the superintendent search. And you'll be getting some press releases that MSBA sends to the district, and they will release through their normal channels as far as who's been selected to be interviewed, who's being moved on to round 2, and who is being negotiated with for the permanent job. So please do keep apprised of what is happening and when. I am going to close unless, Amy, is there anything else in the chat box that I should address before I do that?
There is not.
All right, thank you very much.
Yep.
So just a reminder that this recording will be posted on the district website. It does take us a day or two to upload everything to YouTube and to edit it down. So it will be available, my guess is, in a day or two. So please do watch it again. Please fill out that survey before midnight on the 10th of April. I also want to thank you for your attention today, but also mostly I want to thank you for your interest in and your support of the education of the students in Hastings Public Schools. I know how much the board appreciates you being here and your input and your passion for the education of the students there. So thank you. My name is Barb Dorn. If you need anything, my contact information is on that brochure. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. So take care, everyone. And again, thank you so much for being here with us today. Take care. Bye-bye.